Hey everyone, this is Ricardo with Gathering Magic, and today we're going to be going over our top picks for Dragons of Tarkir. I have several guests helping me out today with this, as we want to go over a few avenues. There's Kenji, aka Numat the Nummy, to go over his limited picks. I'm going to go over my modern picks. Adam Styborski will be covering Commander. Kevin will be going over his rogue picks, and David Green will show you the most rules-confusing card from this set. We have a lot to cover, so let's get started.
Hello friends, Kenji aka Numat the Nummy, here as your local spew guru, limited expert, here to talk about Gathering Magic's top picks from Dragons of Tarkir. What I'll be doing is I will be going over my top 3 commons, top 3 uncommons, top 3 rares, and then lastly, the number 1 mythic from Dragons of Tarkir in a limited aspect. So without further ado, let's do it. Jump in. Number 3 common from the set, Epic Confrontation. This is a 1 green, 1 colorless sorcery. Target creature you control gets +1/+2 until end of turn. It fights target creature you don't control. Now, if you had a chance to play with Savage Punch, you already know this card is basically Savage Punch with Ferocious already enabled. It doesn't get much better than this for green removal. It's cheap, it's efficient, it lets your smaller creatures trade up, and you know, there's just not much to say. It's a common, so would highly recommend playing this card in any of your green-based decks. Epic Confrontation, number 3 common from Dragons of Tarkir. Number 2, you might not think about it, is the Zephyr Scribe. This is a 1 blue, 2 colorless, 2/1 human monk. It has an activated ability of blue, tap it, draw a card, then discard a card. Now, in limited, looters, as they're affectionately known, are very good. Because your deck size is usually around 40, these cards let you filter through your deck a lot faster, drawing into your, bigger bombs, removal, just a nice variety of card selection that you might not otherwise have. And as always, there are some graveyard shenanigans that you can do, some synergies that interact with Zephyr Scribe, so a very, very good card. Now, additionally, it has, whenever you cast a non-creature spell, untap Zephyr Scribe. So, not only does this work extremely well as a looter, you can potentially do it multiple times a turn if you cast non-creature spells. Also, this can be a surprise blocker. It doesn't have to be on your turn. You can cast an instant on your opponent's turn while your Zephyr Scribe is tapped, and it can untap and maybe provide a useful block. So number 2 common from the set, Zephyr Scribe. Number 1, you probably know this card if you've been playing Magic for any amount of time. It's a reprint. It's Pacifism. 1 white, 1 colorless, enchantment, aura, enchanted creature cannot attack or block. As far as removal goes, this is about as efficient as you're going to get. It's cheap, it's easy. Sure, you have to cast it on your main phase, but it'll deal with plenty of the bombs in this format, which there are plenty of, the dragons and whatnot. It's just so easy to do. This is a card that's easily splashable and definitely worth it. Number 1 common, in my opinion, Pacifism. Let's move on to the uncommons now. Now, there were quite a few uncommons to choose from. It was hard to narrow them all down, but I think I did a good job. I'm actually going to start with number 3, and this is a card that a lot of you might not think is very good, but just because it has basically the same flavor as a card that we've seen in the past, I added it as the number 3 uncommon. This card is Deadly Wanderings. 2 black, 3 colorless, enchantment. Now, as far as limited is concerned, if it's an expensive enchantment, it better have a great effect. And this one, it has a pretty good one. Deadly Wanderings reads, as long as you control exactly 1 creature, that creature has +2/+0 and has Death Touch and Lifelink. Yowza, that's pretty spicy. The card that I was talking about previously was Homicidal Seclusion from Avacyn Restored, which is basically the same, but Deadly Wandering has the added upside of adding Death Touch. So if you have 1 creature, not only is it going to have an added power, +2, not only is it going to have Lifelink, it's going to have Death Touch. So, while you are swinging in, gaining large amounts of life, if they want to trade with that creature at some point, their creature is going to die as well, just because of the Death Touch. So, this might be a sleeper card, we'll have to see. Number 3 pick for uncommon is Deadly Wanderings. Let's move on to the next one now. Number 2 for uncommons, I chose the Swift Warkite. Now this is 1 black, 1 red, 4 colorless for a 4/4 flyer. It's a dragon, so Fine stats on its own for a limited 4/4 flyer for 6, not bad. When Swift Warkite enters the battlefield, you may put a creature card with converted mana cost 3 or less from your hand or graveyard onto the battlefield. Whoa, that's pretty good. That creature gains haste. Return it to your hand at the beginning of the next end step. So, not only are you getting a 4/4 flyer, you're hopefully getting a creature with converted mana cost 3 or less back from your graveyard or into play from your hand just for free. Great value, 2 for 1 attached to, a 4/4 flyer. If you're able to get a creature back from your yard, bonus to you. I think this is a very, very powerful card. Expect to play it quite a bit. Number 2, Swift Warkite. The number 1 uncommon, in my opinion, from Dragons of Tarkir, in a limited sense, is the Silumgar Sorcerer. This is 2 blue, 1 colorless, 2/1, flash, flying, exploit. That's a lot of things. When Silumgar Sorcerer exploits a creature, counter target creature spell. Wowzers. So, not only is this a perfectly fine creature on its own without the exploit, it's a 2/1 flash flyer. That's perfectly acceptable, especially for 3 mana. It has the added benefit of being able to counter a creature spell. Now, in a format dominated with dragons and other huge creatures, being able to counter them and still develop your board, in some sense at least, if you're exploiting a creature, you have to sacrifice one, but still developing your board with a creature is huge. And in a pinch, if you don't have a creature, you can always just use the Silumgar Sorcerer as a 3 mana Essence Scatter by itself, because for exploit, it just says sacrifice a creature. It doesn't have to be another creature. So Silumgar Sorcerer is up there as my number 1 uncommon from Dragons of Tarkir. Let's move on to the rares now. Now, there were so many good rares to choose from, even more than the uncommons, but I think I did a pretty good job of narrowing them down. I think for sure, number 3 rare, in my opinion, is the Hidden Dragon Slayer. This is a 1 white, 1 colorless, 2/1 lifelink with Megamorph. When Hidden Dragon Slayer is turned face up, destroy target creature with power 4 or greater and opponent controls. Like I was talking about before, this is just like a 2 for 1 attached to what can be a decent body, right? If you play this on turn 3 as a morph, and then Megamorph it at some point during the game, you have a 3/2 lifelink there, and you've also killed a creature with power 4 or greater. I've said it before, but in a format dominated with dragons and other huge creatures, getting a 3/2 lifelink while killing an opponent's creature, excellent. Excellent. Doesn't get much better than that. So number 3, Hidden Dragon Slayer. Number 2, and I was kind of waffling on this, but overall I think it is a pretty dang good card. I chose the Sunscorch Regent. This is a 2 white, 3 colorless, 4/3 flyer. Fine stats on its own, especially for limited. Sunscorch Regent has, whenever an opponent casts a spell, put a 1/1 counter on Sunscorch Regent and you gain 1 life. So, as long as this has successfully resolved, even if your opponent has a removal on the spot, you've at least gained 1 life, right? Now, that doesn't seem amazing, but it's better than nothing. But just think, if they don't have a removal spell and they're trying to develop their board, this card is just going to continuously get bigger, gain you some amount of life. And, say they find their removal spell after casting 2 or 3 other spells. Well, Sunscorch Regent's already gotten huge, and you've gained, a substantial amount of life, which is 2 or 3, maybe even 4. It also combos nicely with creatures, with +1/+1 abilities, rather things that interact with 1/1 abilities. Because you are putting the counters on Sunscorch Regent, so something to think about. Sunscorch Regent, my number 2 pick for rare. Number 1, similar to the Sunscorch, is the Icefall Regent. Same stats, different cost though. It is 2 blue, 3 colorless for a 4/3 flyer. Now, when Icefall Regent enters the battlefield, target creature and opponent controls, tap target creature and opponent controls. That creature doesn't untap during its controller's untap step for as long as you control Icefall Regent. Pretty good, right? Wait, there's more. Spells your opponents cast that target Icefall Regent cost 2 more to cast. So, not only do you get a 4/3 flyer for 5, you tap down an opposing creature for as long as you have the Icefall Regent, and your opponent's removal costs 2 colorless more, to kill it. I think this is a great card. It's basically removal, unless they have, removal at some point. It's a 4/3 flyer. It's hard to kill. Excellent pick. My number 1 rare from this set for limited is Icefall Regent. Now, let's quickly move on to the Mythic. My number 1 choice, and this might seem a little bit weird, you know, with all the planeswalkers and whatnot running around. But my number one choice for Mythic in this set is Dragonlord Atarka. Dragonlord Atarka is 1 red, 1 green, 5 colorless, so 7 mana, a hefty price, for an 8/8 flying trample. Yeah, Atarka is huge. Additionally, when Dragonlord Tarkir enters the battlefield, it deals 5 damage, divided as you choose, among any number of target creatures and or planeswalkers your opponents control. Now, in Limited, you know, the planeswalker dealing damage to them might not be as relevant because you're not going to see them as often, but being able to kill, you know, like your opponent's largest creature if you want to deal all 5 to something, or being able to split them up and kill multiple creatures is huge. I know there are tons of other mythics to choose from, but this one has an immediate impact when it enters the board, and even if they have a removal spell, you know, you've probably at least gotten a 2-for-1 by killing a creature and then drawing out the removal. Dragonlord Atarka is going to take over a game almost immediately. When she comes in, she's huge. It doesn't get much better than that. Planeswalkers like Sarkhan and Narset are very, very good, don't get me wrong, but I think board presence-wise, Dragonlord Atarka is the top mythic from Dragons of Tarkir. So, just to recap, commons, we have Epic Confrontation number 3, Zephyr Scribe number 2, Pacifism number 1. For uncommons, we have Deadly Wanderings as my sleeper number 3, Swift Warkite number 2, Silumgar Sorcerer number 1. For rares, we have Hidden Dragonslayer number 3, Sunscorch Regent number 2, Icefall Regent number 1. And then, of course, Dragonlord Atarka as the top mythic for Limited. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed this little set review, and I'm looking forward to playing with all the cards. We'll see you back next time.
Thank you, Kenji, for your wonderful insight on Limited. Next up, I'm going to go over my top picks for Modern from Dragons of Tarkir, starting with Common and ending at Mythic Rare. At Common, you really have to dig deep because Commons just most of the time aren't very good. However, this one stuck out like a sore thumb. We got Anticipate. Anticipate has been compared to Telling Time since the card was previewed, but I think this card in most cases is just better. Playing Scapeshift will show you how often you want to just put both cards on the bottom. Well, with Anticipate, you have to. It's not a big deal, but it's pretty important as far as differences are considered. With either card, you are typically using them to dig for a certain card, whether it's a land or a spell. Telling Time allows you to look at 3 cards. Here, we'll represent them with A, B, and C. Card A is what you're going to draw, B is the card that you are going to place on top of your library, and C is the card you're going to put on the bottom of your library. In most cases, A, B, or C might be the card you're looking for. However, let's say you whiff. It happens to everybody. You draw A, put B on the top, and C on the bottom. Now you have to wait till after you've drawn B to see if you can then draw the card that you were looking for. Anticipate allows you to draw the best of 3, and then allows you to start drawing the next set of cards. This is a big difference. While some of you might think, what's the big deal? That's only one draw step. It could be the difference between winning or losing. Low-costing dig spells in blue have always proven to be insane, and I don't expect this card to be any different. Finding good uncommons isn't hard most of the time, but finding the best and most playable one for Modern is a bit tougher. However, I think I found it in the form of Rending Volley. Rending Volley is exactly what the doctor ordered. We have a card to help any deck with red against the dreaded Twin List. This card is strictly better than Combust. While some of you naysayers are saying, well, it doesn't kill Rhino, Combust can, think of it this way. Which matchups do you really bring Combust in for? Honestly, you can't say they're for Rhino, and just so happen to be good against Twin. If that were the case, I'll help you out by suggesting Deathmark. Rending Volley is going to be quite a good card for Jund or Jeskai Control to use against Twin, as it will most likely replace Combust. Rares are always hard. You have to pick the one that can go toe-to-toe with what's already been defined as good, and with no play experience, it only gets harder. Here we have Collected Company. This card is quite bonkers in the right decks like Zoo, especially Zoo. In Zoo, there are only so many outlets to dump your mana, and this is an awesome card to dump your mana into. The deck specializes in having cheap and efficient creatures also. Let's look at what creatures are sweet targets for this card. We have Tarmogoyf, Baldnacatl, Knight of the Reliquary, Noble Hierarch, Blade Splicer, Leonin Arbiter, Flickerwisp, Flinthoof Boar, and Fulminator Mage. Now, I wanted to encompass everything that's not just Zoo, so I went ahead and I included Jund, Abzan, and Hate Bears into this evaluation as well. This card will likely be played as a 1 or 2 of in Zoo and Hate Bears, but it's going to take some time. I really like this card in these decks though. because 4 mana for potential Wealth of Power on board is outrageous. For Mythic Rare, we have been given a bunch of choices, but a few solid ones for Modern. Now, I'm not saying they are terrible, but they are competing with other Mythics like Tarmogoyf, Vendilion Clique, and Dark Confidant, so this has to be a Tonka tough pick. For my Mythic Rare, I have chosen Narset Transcendent. Now, this card has what it takes to tussle in Modern. With a whopping 6 loyalty counters for 4, it can withstand a blow from Goyf and early Taskers and still be left standing. In Modern, white-blue control decks can win games on the back of their lands and stall the board for long periods of time. Narset fits right in with the strategy because of her first and last ability. A very high percent of the time, you will be drawing a card from her first ability, and with her last ability, you can just shut off your opponent's only ways of stopping you. She's going to see Modern play for sure. Enough with Modern though, let's go to the casual and wonderful format that really makes you think. Commander.
Hey everybody, it's Adam Saborski, Gathering Magic's content manager, and I'm here to talk to you about my top picks for Commander from Dragons Tarkir. I write a lot about Commander, I play a lot of Commander, it's the format I love the most, and as much as I'm excited to draft and see what happens with Standard and Modern, with Dragons Tarkir hitting the scene this week, it's Commander that I'm just going to be grabbing cards and slamming them into decks for. So I'm going to talk to you about 6 today. 3 of them are right off the top from the command cycle, the allied colored instants that do a whole bunch of stuff for you. The first is a Tarkis command. The ability to mess with opponent's life gain is fine. It's an interesting ability, but it's really the fact that you're going to get a ton of damage to opponents for just 2 mana. 9 damage, 12 damage in a 4-player, 5-player game. Plus the ability to put a land into play on an opponent's turn is super valuable. It's one of those instances that can sit in your hand, and if you have other things that you want to do, or you want to wait and see what opponents are planning, you can kind of leave your mana open, and with just 2 mana, you can dish out some damage, get a land into play, untap, play another land, and do even more. It's a really nice 1-2 sequence that I'm looking forward to doing. The second is Kolaghan's Command. This is the red-black command, and I really like it because it does something that's kind of a little unique in Magic. The ability to pull a creature card back from your graveyard to your hand at instant speed isn't something you find a lot. So players that like to exile the graveyards or kind of do a lot of management of the graveyards and kind of avoid, letting you get some value out of that, being able to surprise them at instant speed is great because you can kind of get them when the shields are down or they're tapped out. You can get a creature back that's really important or valuable for your deck. And the fact that it can also blow up an artifact, or deal 2 damage to an annoying creature and kill it, or just make an opponent discard a card, all these other modes are super relevant. You're never not going to have enough targets for Kolaghan's Command in your deck. The final command I want to talk about is the reason I'm going to make a blue-black deck as soon as I can get my hands on everything from Dragons Tarkir. That's Silumgar's Command. Giving a creature -3/-3 and killing it is fine. Countering a non-creature spell is okay. There are a lot of ways to do that, and stopping a wrath effect can be useful here and there. Stopping somebody's really tough enchantment can be a good thing. But it's the fact that it can deal with 2 planeswalkers at the same time that I really, really like. Just destroy target planeswalker. Great. Get it off the table. No Elspeth ultimate for you. No more shenanigans from Kiora. Just gone. Get rid of it. And the fact that it can bounce another planeswalker is really nice too. So if somebody's got 2 planeswalkers or 3 planeswalkers down and they're doing this control thing, getting rid of 2 of them at once can really reopen the game up and kind of get everybody back on board with doing things and having a chance to interact. So I'm not always the biggest fan of the all planeswalkers deck, so having a way of dealing with 2 at once is nice for me. The other 3 cards I'm super excited about from Dragons Tarkir are they're all creatures, of course, because I love my creatures in Commander. The first is Swift Warkite. This is the 6-mana red-black 4/4 flying dragon that when it enters the battlefield, from your hand or from your graveyard, put a creature card with converted mana cost 3 or less onto the battlefield. It gains haste, and then at the end of the turn, return it to your hand. So it's kind of like dash reanimation from the graveyard, or just like give anything cheap in your hand dash. It's one of those ways that you can get a lot of value out of just something that's already going to be a great creature to fly around and beat down with. So like with Eternal Witness in your graveyard, or Yavimaya Elder, something like that, where that you want to get some additional value out of a creature, it's going to pay off. And there's a ton of creatures that have converted cost 3 or less that are super fine utility cards in Commander that I know I'm going to be pairing this up with. It's going to be great. The second creature that I also want to talk about is Sunscorch Regent. This is one of Abe Sargent's top cards from his top 10 list from Dragons Tarkir and Gathering Magic. You should check that out and read his column. It's great. It's basically a white flying Taurian Mauler, just a 5-mana dragon, and every time an opponent casts a spell, you put a +1/+1 counter on it. The ability just to get a bigger and bigger creature with no additional investment in a multiplayer game where you have multiple opponents all trying to cast spells and advance their game every turn is great. You're just going to get a huge creature. You're going to force somebody to deal with it. And it's only 5 mana to cast. It's a relatively cheap creature to work with. So, I highly recommend find a foil copy, pick yours up, slam it into a deck. You will not be disappointed getting it down and play early. The last creature I want to talk about is Silumgar Sorcerer. And this is an uncommon. It's not a rare. It's not that flashy or surprising, but it's one that I know is going to surprise me and kind of pull the wool over my eyes at some point. It's a 2/1 flying with flash, and it costs 1 and double blue. So it basically costs the same as like Cancel or Dissipate or most of the counter spells that you see these days. And what it does is it's basically the exploit counterspell. When it enters the battlefield, you can exploit a creature. If you do, counter target spell. And if you've played with Mystic Snake or some of other creature-based counter spells, you know how valuable it is having a counter spell tacked onto the creature. Being able to recur it over and over with like a blue-black deck or a blue-green deck, bouncing it back to your hand and kind of reusing it over and over if you have like tokens from other things and like blue-white. It's one of those really powerful ways that for a little bit of mana and a creature that people aren't going to necessarily have on their radar, you can really have something valuable in your hand from the moment's right. I'm not a big fan of countering every spell in the Commander game. I think that's not something you should try to do. But having a way to just, have a 2/1 flyer and throw some equipment on it and bash down after you counter somebody's Wrath effect, that's totally fine. That's a great way to really have a kind of like a safety valve built into a deck. It's a great flyer. It's going to surprise people. You don't even have to exploit. You can just end of turn, bring in a 2/1 flyer, equip it with something, and hit on your main phase. It works both on the offense and the defense like that. So those are my top picks from Commander. I know you guys are going to have a ton more picks at home, so if you can leave some in the comments below, I'd love to see what you guys are super excited about from the set. And thanks.
Thanks, Adam, for your picks on Commander. Next up, we have Kevin, our Rogue Deck Builder extraordinaire, to give us his picks.
Hi there, it's Kevin with RogueDeckBuilder.com. GatheringMagic.com has asked me to give my top 3 cards that I am most excited to brew around from Dragons of Tarkir. But instead of picking the top 3 cards from Dragons of Tarkir, I'm actually going to pick a number of cards from Dragons of Tarkir and tell you my top 3 cards from other sets that I think get a lot of love from Dragons of Tarkir, and I'm most excited to reinvent them from this set. So the first one I want to talk about is Master of Waves, specifically Mono Blue Devotion. From the Dragons of Tarkir, it's no surprise with the blatant triple Mono Blue card with Shorecrasher Elemental. Shorecrasher Elemental curves perfectly with Master of Waves. We still don't have a 2-drop with Double Blue Devotion that's any decent, but we do have some aggressive 1 and 2 drops with Frost Elemental and the new Salamander from the set, or just the old Merfolk that has Unblockable. You can have a pretty aggressive curve, and then Shorecrasher works perfectly in that curve up to the Master of Waves. Now, another card that we get that I don't think a lot of people have really thought about in Mono Blue Devotion is Silumgar Sorcerer. This is a 3-mana with the Exploit, which you can easily either exploit itself to counter like a Siege Rhino or something like that. But I just like to kind of trade up Devotion, so a first turn you again will have like an Unblockable or a 1/1 flying creature that you can then sacrifice to the Silumgar Sorcerer, then counter a threat like a Whisperwood Elemental or a Siege Rhino or something from your opponent, and then have double Devotion and a 2/1 flying creature. That can be done with Flash. So the other card that I also want to talk about that I think is kind of snazzy for Mono Blue Devotion, and people have talked about putting this on a Siege Rhino, but I think the Mono Blue is perfect for the Mirror Mockery, as the best target I can think of for Mirror Mockery is going to be put on the Master of Waves, as when you attack in with Master of Waves, you can put out a bunch of more copies and pump up all your copies of elemental tokens that you have on the battlefield. Now, I think this fits perfectly with Master of Waves because he does have protection from red, so there's a number of decks that he's going to have this pseudo-unblockable feel to him, but also you have this awesome card called Bident of Thassa. Now, this works in 2 ways. One way is you can, well, Thassa herself, Thassa can make Master of Waves unblockable, so with Mirror Mockery, Thassa the God Thassa can actually make Master Waves go in for unblockable, copy itself, and bring in a ton of tokens. But also the Bident Thassa can force, you can put the Mirror Mockery on your opponent's creature, say like a Hornet Queen or a Siege Rhino or a Doomwake Elemental, something like that, or a Doomwake Giant, and you can actually force it to attack in and create a copy of itself, and then get those enter the battlefield type effects. So I'm thinking like Wingmate Rock would be a cool card. Well, I guess Wingmate Rock would not, because the raid only triggers off your opponent raiding. But any enter the battlefield effect, like I said, like the Hornet Queen or Siege Rhino, I think would be a great place to put Mirror Mockery with the Bident Thassa. So going to the next card that I am so excited gets a lot of love from this set is going to be Rally the Ancestors. I think that Exploit is the perfect card for Rally the Ancestors. We have a ton of black exploit cards that want to die, that don't necessarily want to exploit something else, but have a lot of value within themselves to exploit. You have a 2 mana that when it exploits, you can gain 2 life and drain your opponent by 2 damage, which is really cool. You also have a Doomwake Giant type effect, and a draw card and mill yourself type effect, and just a read the bones type effect in a lot of the exploit cards. And I think this is perfect for actually digging for more subsequent Rally the Ancestors. One of my favorite decks I've ever brewed was a Bug Immortal Servitude deck from back in the day, which wanted to kill all of your 2-drops and then recur them, and then a card like Blood Artist would continually tax your opponent or go for the 1-turn kill, just constantly draining your opponent 1 life and 1 damage. So everything in the deck tried to either sack itself or draw cards. So anyway, my last card I want to talk about is Hero's Blade. I think this card gets so much love from the reprints, or the old cons are now reprinted as non-cons. We have Zurgu Bellstriker, who I think fits perfectly with the Hero's Blade, and Anafenza, which also is an awesome 2-drop that becomes a 5/4 with the Hero's Blade, and then can subsequently get bigger when you cast more creatures. But the card I think that this really works with is the new Surrak, as he will become, with Hero's Blade, he's already 5/4 with Hero's Blade. The Formidable mechanic is already triggered with Hero's Blade, so you can go turn 2 Hero's Blade, and then turn 4 you can drop the Surrak, and then he gives himself the haste and can swing in. So I think it's a pretty neat interaction with those 3. So I'm excited because there's a lot of very undercasted legends now in the format with Hero's Blade, and I think that this last set really puts that card into a position where it could actually be standard playable. So once again, those are my top 3 picks, I guess would be Love of, or Dragons of Tarkir gives these love. It'd be Master of Waves from the good old Theros days, Rally the Ancestors from the last set with Fate Reforged, and the Hero's Blade also from the Fate Reforged. So anyway, this has been Kevin with GatheringMagic.com. Thanks for watching.
Those were some really good ones, Kevin. Thanks. Last but certainly not least, we have the judge we all love to bug. Here's David Green with his judge picks.
Hey everyone, David Green here, host of Judge's Corner from Gathering Magic, and today I'm here to talk to you about what I think is the most rules interesting card from Dragons of Tarkir, Hedonist's Trove. Hedonist's Trove is an enchantment, very reminiscent to one of Magic's most powerful spells ever printed, Yawgmoth's Will. Hedonist's Trove is an enchantment that exiles an opponent's graveyard, unlike Yawgmoth's Will, which exiles your own. It lets you cast or play lands from the exiled cards, but, unlike Yawgmoth's Will, those cards can be played over turns, although they're restricted to 1 per turn. And there's also the downside of it possibly being destroyed, locking away those exiled cards forever. The expensive mana cost of 2 black and 5 generic mana make this spell prohibitively expensive to play competitively. And the fact that these cards come from somewhere that you have very little control over means this rare will likely not see very much play outside of Commander. But nevertheless, there are a couple of neat things to talk about with this card. For starters, the limitations on spells of casting only 1 a turn from the Trove can't really be avoided, but you can somewhat get around it by playing spells on either player's turn, perhaps by casting instants on your opponent's turn, or allowing everything to be cast as an instant through an effect like Leyline of Anticipation. The lands played off of the enchantment count towards your land for turn, but you can also get around this limitation with cards like Summerbloom or Azusa. And, since this is primarily a Commander card, there are some related rules to cover. Keep in mind that while playing Commander, you still have to follow the Commander color identity rules. The lands you play that are outside of your color can be tapped for mana, but when they go to produce mana, other than the colors in your general's color identity, it produces colorless instead. But fear not, Cards like Mycosynth Lattice and Celestial Dawn help unify things and allow you to cast those out-of-color spells with ease. There is an honorable mention, which was a close runner-up, and that's Clone Legion. The reason why I want to bring this card to your attention is because of the entire block having all of these face-down crazy cards, and the fact that usually cloning something is a pretty interesting ability all on its own. The biggest thing I want to point out is that if you were to play Clone Legion and get some of your opponents more for manifest cards, you would end up with a couple of clones that are just 2/2 generic cards that almost mimic a morph card, but they can never be turned face up, because the only characteristics you copied were the face that's exposed, and not what's underneath it.
Thanks, David, for your insight on those cards. With all that being said, hopefully we have covered everything for you guys and gals out there. However, if there is anything that we missed or something you would like for us to tack on to future top picks, please let us know in the comments below. Thank you everyone for stopping by here at Gathering Magic.